Hello, Lakshman here. Today we're going to dive into the file structure or project structure of Flutter projects versus React Native projects. There are lots of videos in the internet about Flutter versus React Native. Most of them are about the scope and feature and the holistic approach. Today we're going to dive into the actual code and what a simple Flutter application contains in its code base versus what bare minimum React Native application contains in its framework. Once we understand these basic structures, we will be able to figure out the project more easily. I think this video will be particularly helpful for those who are either Flutter developers or React Native developers and want to explore a little bit about how the code or projects is structured on the other side of the fence. So we have these two different commands. One is Flutter create, and whichever folder you are in, it will create a Flutter project in that folder, or you can also give the name of the project. You'll create a different directory. That is the same case with npx create expo app as well. If you provide a project's name or directory name after it, it will create a new directory inside it. Otherwise, it will use the current directory to create the project. And once these commands run successfully, we will be welcomed with these files in each of the systems. So this is the Flutter land and this is the React Native land. Flutter seems to have lots of folder regarding native frameworks that the Flutter is going to run on. But React Native, surprisingly, does not seem to have any platform whatsoever. And that is because Expo hides those abstractions into its own build system, and it just provides us with this nice and clean TypeScript project without any overwhelming files about operating system. So basically, seems like even though React Native does not support a lot of operating system unlike Flutter, it does it in a way that it's invisible to us. And in most of the designs, if design seems invisible or something seems invisible but it still works, that is a really amazing design. So let's go and dive deeper into how each of these platforms have their files organized. Let's compare and contrast between these two frameworks and the code base. To begin with, we will look into the entry point. What is the file that the application starts in, or what is the main file where our application will start? In case of React Native, it is the layout underscore layout.tsx file inside the app directory. In case of Flutter, it is the main the dart file inside the lib directory. Now let's try to dive deeper into the code base. So I have tried to link its files and folders with what's counterpart of it in the other framework. Simple, right? Right? Yeah, I know what you're feeling right now. That was a mess. So let's try to simplify it from the perspective of a Flutter developer, and we'll come back again from the perspective of React Native developer. All right. So if you're a Flutter developer and you're used to the code base of Flutter, you'll find this part helpful. But continue watching, you'll get the React Native part as well. Dart tool basically has all the information and configuration. Most of them are auto-generated about the Dart itself and the pub build system of it. Similar work is done in React Native with these two folders, .expo and .tsconfig. .tsconfig is about the TypeScript configuration rather than the React, because React is a JavaScript framework, but we write the code in TypeScript, right? So there should be some configuration in the transpile process. So that's what goes into tsconfig file. But most of the framework about how this code is converted into a native application in .expo file. That's where all the magic lies. Now, there are editor specific files and folders as well. In Flutter, when you create a new project with Flutter create, it will create files for IntelliJ IDEA as well. But I don't think it creates for VS Code. So I added it for VS Code manually. And in case of React Native with Expo, it creates that VS Code file as well. Now, in case of platform specific configuration, we have to define each of them in their own respective platforms. Like if you want to configure the package name, if you want to configure or manually override the min STK or pod file and those kind of stuffs, they go into specific platform codes. As you can see, Linux, macOS, and Windows is not supported in React Native, so there is no similar files or folder we can compare to. But most of the configuration that we'll be doing in the native code itself in Flutter is abstracted out in this app.json folder in case React Native. Similarly, all the assets in React Native are organized in assets folder, but in case of Flutter, these assets are scattered everywhere in platform specific code as well as the assets folder itself, because icons and startup splash screen and those kind of things are actually manually set on Androids and iOS native code in Flutter. But in case of React Native, it seems to work just fine if we add those files into assets. Now, in case of build folder, where all of the dependencies and intermediate build files are, that's the build folder in Flutter. But in case of React Native, all the dependencies go into node module folder, and other caches and build related stuffs are stored in .expo directory. All the application code is inside lib directory in Flutter, and the same things are distributed among this flat hierarchy of these component constant hooks folders in React Native. And we can add more folders of JavaScript directories. But in case of Flutter, it's just the lib directory and should have a main file inside it, and everything else, folder organization, its structure, architecture, everything is done inside this folder. In case of React Native, it can be done flat right on the outermost layer of the project in terms of directory. Now, in case of Linux, macOS, and Windows, there is no respective comparable directories in React Native, and also scripts directory that is auto-generated and mostly not used in small projects in React Native does not have anything comparable in Flutter. But again, if you are doing some complicated stuff around build and automation, triggers, and those kind of things, you will need scripts folder in both Flutter and React Native. But scripts are scripts. We will need them when we need them. Most of the time when the project gets big and we need automation. React Native does not come with built-in enforcement of test folders, but Flutter, it comes up with like hard-coded, okay, test must go in that test directory. That's it. You cannot put test anywhere else. But in case of React Native, you can put test anywhere, but some testing frameworks like Jest, they by default support underscore underscore test folder. So most of the test, it would be wise to put them in underscore underscore test folder. Now, obviously, like Git ignore is same in both platform, and the metadata about Flutter and Expo, like versions and stuff, they go into .metadata in Flutter, but they go in expo-env.d file in React Native. Similarly, linting is done with eslint.config.json file in case of React Native, but lint rules are written in analysis underscore optional.aml file in Flutter. Now, in React Native, they're called modules, not modules, right? But in Flutter, we call them plugin. Whatever we call them, they are dependencies, and we define those different dependencies in package.json and app.json in case of React Native. But in Flutter, it only goes in pubspec.aml. And when the build system creates the specific versions of those dependencies, that is auto-generating the pubspec.log, and package-log is the similar case. Some of the versioning and stuff done in app.json, and but most of the dependencies in React Native are still mentioned in package.json file. Now, readme is readme no matter where you put it. Now let's say hello from the other side. Let's go to the React Native side and see Flutter from there. Okay, let's see Flutter from the eyes of a React Native developer. Again, files comparison test, like I told earlier, tests are kept in underscore underscore test in React Native for obvious automatic support from Jest and maybe other testing tools as well. But in Flutter, it must be inside the test directory. Whatever the cache and build intermediates are there, the magic of Expo and React Native is stored inside .expo directory, but that same thing is inside .dart tool and build folder in Flutter. Again, VS Code is purely IDE and editor specific files. So if you open project of React Native in IntelliJ IDEA, I think these files will still be auto-generated there as well. The code that we write inside app, components, constant, hooks, and many other direct we can create are kept only inside the lib directory, Flutter. All the Dart code, which is comparable to all the TypeScript logical application code, goes into one directory in Flutter, that is lib directory. Like I told you, assets are kept in one place in React Native, but multiple platform in Flutter. They can be platform specific assets and there can be common assets. Common assets are kept in this assets directory and platform specific assets are kept in these platform directories themselves. Non-modules, they are comparable to the build directly, and gitignore is gitignore. App.json is basically the main configuration file of it, not the dependency part, but the main guiding file of it. That's the orchestrator of this project, right? The main orchestrator of the project is app.json, but the logic that we write in app.json is scattered among these four directories in Flutter. Similarly, ESLint's job in Flutter is done by analysis underscore option. They are for linting, as you know, and metadata about a particular version or stuff about the framework itself, which is Flutter or Expo React Native, is there in that metadata file. And obviously, package.log, package.json, those things are comparable to pubspec.ml and lock file in Flutter. And tsconfig is basically language configuration, right? So if there is any language related configuration, that goes into Dart's configuration in Flutter. That was a brief discussion, but now let's get deeper. Shall we? Oh, all right. So we will continue in the next video. I think you're already bored and it was already too much. So we will try again in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.